Hey everybody, here are 5 stupid things I've noticed since last time. Scalia calls Voting Rights Act a racial entitlement. Lawyers representing Shelby County, Alabama argued before the Supreme Court late last month that the pre-clearance requirement of the Voting Rights Act, one of the landmark achievements of the civil rights movement in the 1960s, is no longer necessary in their jurisdiction, and therefore it was unconstitutional for Congress to vote to reauthorize the act in 2006. But it's not the merits of that challenge that we've been talking about these last few weeks. No, we've been talking about Supreme Court Justice and sneering enemy of goodness and joy Antonin Scalia and his theory about why the Voting Rights Act was reauthorized with such overwhelming support from both major parties.
I think it is attributed, very likely attributable to a phenomenon that is called perpetuation of racial entitlement. It's been written about. Whenever a society adopts racial entitlements, it is very difficult to get out of them through the normal political processes. I don't think there is anything to be gained by any senator to vote against continuation of this act.
The right of a black person to have the same access to his or her polling place as a white person, a racial entitlement. But you know, I'm sure that Scalia is correct in what he says. I mean, that is obviously the reason why so few members of Congress voted against reauthorizing the Voting Rights Act. After all, we all know how cautious the Republican caucus is of appearing racially insensitive. Speaking of whom, Republicans push mandatory welfare drug testing. Stephen Fincher, a Republican member of Congress from Tennessee, introduced a bill that would require states to randomly drug test their welfare beneficiaries. Because you know that all those freeloaders are out there right now spending our money on dope. Do drug dealers take EBT? A federal court recently struck down a very similar law in Florida on the grounds that it's really fucked up to assume that people applying for welfare benefits are probably drug addicts. But Fincher has that covered. He has devised a solution. His bill contains a requirement that welfare applicants sign a waiver relinquishing their constitutional protections against searches without probable cause. See? He really has thought of everything. Ambassador Rodman. You remember Dennis Rodman. He was a starter with the Chicago Bulls during the latter portion of their heyday in the 1990s. No, not Jordan. No, not Scottie Pippen. No, not John Paxson. No, that's Tim Duncan. There you go, right there. Yes, Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman, you remember him. About 2 weeks ago, he flew to North Korea along with the Harlem Globetrotters, and while he was there, he met pudgy little dictator Kim Jong-un, who he now describes as a friend and a really good guy. When Rodman was informed by This Week host George Stephanopoulos of the many egregious human rights violations committed by UN's oppressive totalitarian regime, Rodman responded saying, quote, "Guess what? Guess what? Don't hate me. Don't hate me. Guess what? Don't hate me. Guess what? Don't hate me." Okay, Dennis. Rand Paul's filibuster. Last week, Republican Senator from Kentucky Rand Paul took to the floor for an old-school filibuster, the talking kind, to block a confirmation vote on President Obama's nominee for CIA director. The real purpose of Paul's filibuster wasn't so much to block that nomination as to demand an answer from Attorney General Eric Holder to the question of whether or not the Obama administration has the authority to use an unmanned drone to kill an American citizen on American soil. And after the 13-hour filibuster was over, Holder sent a letter to Paul briefly answering that question. No, the president doesn't have that authority. And look, that's a very important question, and I'm glad that Holder answered it, and I'm very glad that that was the answer. But this whole episode just seems really, really stupid to me. I think it was stupid that a senator took to the floor of the Senate and basically held his breath and stomped his feet until he got the answer from the Attorney General. I think it's stupid that Senator Paul doesn't seem all that concerned about drones being used to kill people in places other than the United States. And I think that it's really stupid that when he did get his answer from Holder, which was essentially a clarification of an answer that Holder and others in the administration had already given to that question, Senator Paul acted like he had achieved some great victory for democracy and transparency in government, when in fact he was the kid who spent all day screaming for a cookie and finally got one. Governance by crisis. These sequestration cuts went into effect because Congress is in the middle of this whole "we know we suck, we're doing it on purpose" phase. If you're an American like me and you enjoy watching your country's most powerful elected leaders jack off in each other's faces while failing to solve a budget crisis that they themselves created, you're in luck, because you're going to get a chance to see that exact same thing happen at least 2 more times this year. In May, when we reach the debt ceiling again, and in September, when the continuing appropriations resolution expires, which would lead to a government shutdown. Oh, unless that is a bill currently being considered as I shoot this to extend the current continuing resolution fails, in which case the government will shut down later this month. You know, it's all very intriguing if you can forget for a moment how irresponsible and inexcusable and just fucking appalling it all is. I wonder if Boehner will say ass again. The hardest part is only picking 5. Catch you next time.